What would you do if the person you trusted the most was the one pulling the strings behind your worst nightmare? Imagine finding out that the very wedding planner who rejected you for who you were was secretly linked to a web of lies, deceit, and even murder, and you had no idea. But here's the twist. What if you found out, just too late, that you were the real target all along? Lana had always dreamed of being a wedding planner. She didn't just want to organize weddings. She wanted to be the name everyone thought of when it came to luxury, high-class events. It wasn't enough for her to just have a client base. She wanted the right clients, the kind of people who had money, influence, and taste. So, when she landed a big wedding at a posh destination resort, she thought it was her big break. This was no ordinary wedding. It wasn't just about the flowers, the cake, or the dress. It was about prestige. The kind of wedding where the guest list alone could launch a career. People like this didn't just throw lavish parties, they set trends. And for Lana, being the one to plan such an event would put her at the top of the wedding planning world. She was so focused on the future that she barely noticed the details about her clients. Jada and Marcus were a charming couple, both successful in their own right, but they didn't give off the typical wealthy vibe. They weren't flashy, and their style was more understated, something Lana didn't quite get at first. When they walked into her office, their quiet confidence was almost overshadowed by the grandiose ideas Lana already had in mind for their wedding. She had already made up her mind before the meeting even started. They were polite, but they didn't seem like the type to appreciate the extravagant wedding she was planning. They spoke in a calm, measured way, nothing loud or flashy, and that made Lana doubt whether they could truly afford the high-end venue she had in mind. There was something about their demeanor that didn't match the usual clients she was used to. They seemed like a nice couple, but something about them felt out of place in the world Lana wanted to conquer. "You've got great taste, but I think we might need to consider a more practical option," Lana said, casually flicking through her notes. "I have some beautiful, more affordable venues that would suit your style just as well." She was trying to sound professional, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they wouldn't fit with the lavish venue she had planned. Jada smiled, but there was a coolness in her eyes. "We're open to suggestions," Marcus added. But there was something in his tone that made Lana pause. They didn't seem upset, just resigned, like they already knew what was coming. And, just like that, the seed of doubt was planted in Lana's mind. Was she really being professional, or was she letting her own prejudices get in the way? Still, Lana brushed the thought aside. She'd done this 1,000 times before, working with people who were difficult or who didn't understand her vision. This was her chance to shine. So, she went ahead and booked the venue she thought was best for them, one she'd always dreamed of working with. But what Lana didn't know was that this simple decision would set a chain of events into motion that would change everything for her. As the meeting ended and the couple walked out of her office, Lana thought she had it all figured out. She'd wow them with her planning and elevate their wedding to a level they couldn't even imagine. But she hadn't yet realized how badly she'd misjudged them, or the dangerous path she was about to walk down. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind to Lana. She threw herself into the wedding details with her usual fervor, sending emails, making phone calls, and sketching out every detail of the event. The venue she had chosen was one of the most luxurious in the area, a private resort tucked away on a secluded island, known for its breathtaking views and exclusive clientele. It was everything Lana had dreamed of, and she couldn't wait to see the look on Jada and Marcus's faces when they arrived and saw the beautiful setting she had arranged for them. But as the wedding planning went on, Lana started noticing little things that gave her pause. Despite how involved the couple was in the planning, they never seemed particularly excited. They were polite, of course, but there was a distance in their responses, a careful, almost too calm attitude. Whenever Lana presented options, they didn't react the way clients usually did. They weren't thrilled, they weren't jumping at every idea. They simply nodded, asked a few questions, and left the decisions to Lana, trusting her to make everything perfect. At first, Lana thought it was just a quiet confidence, the kind of calm that came with wealth and success. But after a few more meetings, it started to feel more like indifference, and that bothered her. She was used to clients being more enthusiastic, especially when they were paying for the kind of extravagance Lana was offering. The couple wasn't asking for anything over the top, but the way they handled everything, almost as if they didn't care one way or the other, made Lana wonder, were they really the right clients for such a high-end wedding? Then, one day, she got a call from the venue. There was an issue with the booking, and the resort manager wanted to confirm some details. Lana was already stressed, trying to juggle her schedule, so she quickly brushed it off. But the conversation ended with a strange comment that made her freeze for a second. The manager mentioned the wedding planners for the event as the owners of the venue. The owners? Lana assumed it was a mix-up or a technical term they used for those handling high-profile events. After all, this was a top-tier venue, and Lana had worked with wealthy clients before, so she didn't think too much of it. But something about it stuck in the back of her mind. The next day, when she casually mentioned this to her assistant, who had been doing some background work on the couple, things took a turn. "Wait a second," her assistant said, flipping through some papers. "Lana, you didn't know? Jada and Marcus actually own the venue. They didn't just book it, they run the place. That's their resort." Lana froze. She felt a sudden wave of heat flood her chest, followed by a chill. She had just put them in a less-than-ideal venue because she didn't think they could afford the best one, assuming their calm demeanor meant they didn't fit the elite crowd. But it wasn't about money at all. They owned the place. The reality hit her all at once. She had made a mistake, a huge one. Not only had she underestimated them, but she had also turned down their original request for the very venue they ran, assuming they weren't capable of affording it. In that moment, Lana felt a knot tighten in her stomach, the weight of her own biases bearing down on her. She had let her judgments get in the way, and now it was too late to fix things. The couple, Jada and Marcus, hadn't said anything, but the look in their eyes during the meetings made sense now. They weren't disappointed in her planning. They were disappointed in her lack of knowledge, in her assumption that they couldn't afford what they had built with their own hands. Suddenly, the idea that she could turn things around, impress them, and have this wedding be her big break seemed ridiculous. She had already lost their trust. The realization made her stomach churn. How could she fix this now? There was no easy way out. As the days ticked closer to the wedding, Lana's anxiety grew. Every time she saw Jada and Marcus, they seemed a little more distant, a little more removed. It wasn't just the awkwardness of the situation that bothered her, it was the feeling that she had failed them. Lana had prided herself on being the best at what she did, but now she felt like an imposter. She had made a major misstep, and there was no easy way to take it back. Despite her growing discomfort, Lana pressed on. She threw herself into the final preparations for the wedding. desperately trying to make up for her earlier blunders. She tried to be overly accommodating, offering last-minute tweaks and changes, hoping to win back their favor. But every time she suggested something, Jada and Marcus merely nodded, offering no real feedback. Their responses were polite but cold, like they were humoring her, not invested in the process at all. One afternoon, Lana received a text from Jada. It was simple, just a few words, but it was a punch in the gut. "We need to talk. Can you meet us at the venue?" Lana's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what to expect. Part of her hoped that they had decided to forgive her mistake, that maybe they were ready to move past it. But another part of her was terrified of what they might say. Was this the moment they would finally tell her that they were taking their business elsewhere? That they no longer trusted her with their big day? She drove to the venue, her palms clammy against the steering wheel. The resort looked even more beautiful in the afternoon light, the ocean shimmering in the distance. But instead of feeling inspired by the view, Lana felt small, overwhelmed by the weight of her earlier actions. She had been so confident, so certain that this wedding would be her crowning achievement, but now it was just another reminder of how much she had messed up. When she arrived at the venue, she was escorted to a private meeting room. Jada and Marcus were already there, standing by a large window overlooking the ocean. They didn't smile when Lana walked in. Instead, they looked at her with a quiet intensity that made her stomach turn. "We need to talk," Jada said again, her voice calm but firm. Lana sat down, her heart racing. She braced herself for the worst, but what they said next was the last thing she expected. "We've been thinking about the wedding," Marcus began, his tone cool but collected. "We appreciate the work you've put into the event, but we need to make one thing clear. This isn't just any wedding. This is a statement." Lana's eyebrows furrowed. A statement? What did that mean? Jada picked up where Marcus left off. "This is about much more than just the celebration of our love. This is about showing people that we don't need their approval. We don't need anyone to tell us who we are or what we can accomplish." Lana's mind raced. She was still trying to understand what they were saying, what this had to do with her. "We want the world to see us for who we really are," Marcus continued, "and we want this wedding to send a message about how we will no longer be underestimated." The words hit Lana like a punch to the gut. She had been so wrapped up in making a name for herself, so focused on impressing the couple, that she had completely missed the bigger picture. This wedding wasn't just about luxury. It was about power, identity, and standing up against the very people who had, in some way, doubted them. And Lana was one of those people. They weren't just clients to impress. They were people with something to prove. And Lana had failed to see that. "You don't get it, do you?" Jada said, her voice cutting through Lana's thoughts. "This isn't about the flowers or the venue. It's about respect. And we're not going to let anyone, including you, make us feel small." The weight of the situation settled on Lana like a heavy stone. She had thought they were just another high-profile couple, but now she realized how wrong she had been. This was no ordinary wedding. This was their moment to reclaim their story, to show the world who they were. She opened her mouth to apologize, but the words stuck in her throat. What could she say? She couldn't undo the damage she had done. The trust she had lost couldn't be repaired with a few words. As Lana sat in silence, the couple exchanged a look. It was clear that the wedding would go on, but the dynamic had shifted. She wasn't the expert anymore. She was an outsider. Lana left the meeting feeling like she had been hit by a freight train. The couple hadn't yelled at her or stormed out in anger, but their words had a quiet, piercing force that left her reeling. She couldn't stop thinking about what Jada and Marcus had said. This wasn't just another wedding. It was a statement. For the first time in her career, Lana realized how out of touch she had been. She had been so focused on making things perfect in her world, the world of luxury weddings and elite clients, that she had missed the deeper layers of what this event meant for Jada and Marcus. This wasn't about impressing guests with opulence. It was about defying the expectations placed on them because of who they were. They had grown up fighting against stereotypes, against being overlooked or dismissed. This wedding was their chance to take control of the narrative, and Lana had failed to see that from the start. The shift in power was palpable. The couple had been polite throughout the entire planning process. But now, Lana could feel the weight of their control. The roles had reversed. She wasn't the one calling the shots anymore. She was the one playing catch-up, trying to anticipate their next move, their next demand. They weren't just clients anymore. They were her equals, holding the reins, and she had to follow their lead. As the wedding day drew closer, Lana worked even harder, trying to do everything right. She made sure every detail was perfect, hoping to make up for her earlier mistakes. But no matter how hard she worked, there was a sense of unease hanging in the air. Jada and Marcus were still polite, but there was an undercurrent of tension that Lana couldn't shake. At one point, Lana overheard a conversation between the couple as they discussed the seating arrangements for the ceremony. They spoke in hushed tones, but the words were sharp and deliberate. It wasn't just about where people sat. It was about sending a message. The power dynamics were being laid out in front of her, and she could no longer ignore them. This wedding was as much about the guests as it was about them. Everyone would be watching, waiting to see how they were treated, how their event played out. The more Lana thought about it, the more she realized how much the couple's plan was rooted in defiance. It wasn't just about luxury or beauty. It was about reclaiming their space in a world that had so often tried to put them in a box. And now, Lana was a part of that story, whether she wanted to be or not. But there was something else in the air, something Lana couldn't put her finger on. It wasn't just the couple's desire to make a statement, it was their coldness. As the days passed, she couldn't help but notice that Jada and Marcus had become more distant, even when she was present. It was like they were closing off parts of themselves, becoming harder to read. Lana had seen this before, with people who were hiding something they didn't want anyone to know. Still, she pressed on, eager to finish what she had started, to redeem herself in the eyes of the couple. But as she looked at the guest list one final time, her eyes were drawn to a name she hadn't noticed before: Raven DeMarco. Raven was a well-known figure in the world of business, a billionaire who had built his empire from the ground up. He was a powerful man, but more than that, he was a man who wasn't afraid to take risks. Lana had heard rumors about him, whispers that he wasn't just successful, but also ruthless when it came to business. Why was he on the guest list? Her curiosity got the better of her, and she asked Jada about him during one of their final planning meetings. Jada's response was brief, almost dismissive. Raven's family. He's been part of my life for a long time. Don't worry about him. But there was something about the way she said it that sent a chill down Lana's spine. Why had Jada been so quick to shut down the topic? What was it about Raven DeMarco that made her so uncomfortable? Lana couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this wedding than just a statement. There were layers hidden beneath the surface, and if she wasn't careful, she might find herself in deeper than she ever expected. The night before the wedding, Lana couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her hotel room, the events of the past few days swirling in her mind. There was so much tension, so much left unsaid. Despite her best efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The more she thought about Raven DeMarco and the way Jada had shut down the conversation, the more her unease grew. It was like she was missing a key piece of the puzzle, and she needed to find out what it was before the wedding tomorrow. Lana's curiosity got the best of her. She couldn't just ignore it. She had to know why Raven was so important to Jada, and why she had acted so strangely when his name came up. Without thinking, Lana pulled out her phone and began Googling him. The results were more than she had bargained for. Raven DeMarco was no ordinary businessman. His wealth was staggering, and his reputation even more so. Rumors had swirled for years about his ties to criminal organizations, money laundering, and other illicit dealings. But the thing that made Lana's heart race was a photo she stumbled upon. It was an old image, a black and white picture of a much younger Raven standing beside none other than Marcus. They were both smiling, arms around each other, as though they had been lifelong friends. Lana's stomach dropped. What was going on here? Why hadn't Marcus mentioned this? Why hadn't Jada? And why was it so important to keep this a secret? The pieces of the puzzle started to shift in Lana's mind. This wasn't just a couple hosting a wedding. It was a web of hidden relationships, power plays, and possibly dangerous connections. Marcus and Raven were connected in ways that Lana couldn't yet fully understand. But one thing was clear. Whatever this connection was, it ran deep, and it was serious. The more Lana thought about it, the more she realized how little she actually knew about Jada and Marcus. Everything she had assumed about them had been wrong. The wealthy couple, the perfect clients, were hiding something far darker than she had imagined. And now, Lana was knee-deep in it, whether she liked it or not. She paced the room, her thoughts spiraling. What had she gotten herself into? If Jada and Marcus had ties to people like Raven, people with money and power beyond her imagination, was she in danger? And what about the wedding? Would it still go ahead tomorrow? Or was there something more sinister lurking behind the scenes, waiting to reveal itself? In the early hours of the morning, just as the first light of dawn began to break, Lana decided to take action. She needed answers. She needed to confront Jada and Marcus before it was too late. There was no turning back now. She grabbed her coat and made her way to the resort, her heart pounding in her chest. The wind whipped through the trees as she approached the venue, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore only added to the tension building in the pit of her stomach. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Something she wasn't prepared for. But whatever it was, Lana knew one thing for sure. She was about to get a lot more than she had bargained for. Lana arrived at the resort just as the sun began to rise, casting a soft, golden light across the sprawling venue. It looked peaceful, serene even, but she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in her gut. She had to confront Jada and Marcus, and she had to do it now, before the wedding, before things spiraled further out of control. As she walked through the venue, the normally calming sight of the pristine white chairs and the beautiful floral arrangements only added to her anxiety. It felt like everything was set up for a perfect day, but Lana knew better. There was something lurking beneath the surface, something she wasn't seeing. She found Jada and Marcus in the bridal suite, speaking in hushed tones. As Lana entered, they both looked up, their expressions unreadable. There was no greeting, no warmth in their eyes, only a cold, calculated calmness that sent a shiver down Lana's spine. "Lana," Jada said, her voice steady but not welcoming. "What brings you here this early?" Lana swallowed hard, her hands clammy. She had rehearsed what she was going to say, but now that the moment was here, the words felt stuck in her throat. "Jada, Marcus," she began, trying to steady her voice. "I need to know the truth. What's really going on here? I've been doing my best to make this wedding perfect, but there's something I'm missing. The way you've been acting, the secrecy about Raven. What aren't you telling me?" For a moment, there was only silence. Jada exchanged a glance with Marcus, her eyes narrowing slightly. It was clear she hadn't expected Lana to confront them. Not so directly. "We don't owe you an explanation, Lana," Marcus said finally, his voice calm, almost too calm. "But we'll tell you this. This wedding isn't just about two people coming together. It's about something much bigger than that. It's about making sure everyone knows that we're not just some token couple. You know, the kind that gets played in the media for cheap headlines. We're powerful. We've worked hard to be where we are." Lana's heart raced as she listened, but she wasn't done. She needed more answers, and she wasn't going to back down. "I understand that you want this wedding to make a statement, but why the secrecy about Raven? Why keep it hidden?" Jada's face remained neutral, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a hint of something darker. "It's complicated," Jada said softly, her voice colder now. "Some things don't need to be said, especially not now." Marcus leaned forward, his jaw tight. "What's important is that this day goes smoothly. That's all you need to worry about." But Lana wasn't satisfied with that answer. She could feel the walls closing in, the tension thickening the air around them. There was more. They were hiding something. She could sense it. "You're not telling me everything," Lana pressed, her voice shaking now. "What's your real connection to Raven? Why does it matter so much?" Jada took a deep breath, looking at Marcus before turning back to Lana. "You really want to know?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Fine, but don't say we didn't warn you." Lana's heart raced as Jada slowly spoke. "Raven's been a part of my life for a long time. He helped me get where I am today. But it's not just business, it's personal too. Marcus and I have had dealings with him, and not just any dealings, Lana, things that could change everything. So yes, we kept it quiet. Not because we're ashamed, but because if the wrong people found out, well, let's just say it could get messy." Lana felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. Dealings? What kind of dealings were they talking about? And what did Raven have to do with all of it? She opened her mouth to ask more, but Marcus cut her off. "That's enough," he said firmly. "We don't need to get into all of that right now. You've done your job. Now, stay out of the rest of it." Lana was taken aback. This wasn't the same couple she had been working with. The friendly, professional demeanor had been replaced by a cold, almost threatening edge. The shift in their behavior was stark, and Lana felt a chill crawl down her spine. They were hiding something much darker, something that went beyond just wedding plans. "You're playing a dangerous game," Lana said, her voice trembling. "Whatever this is, it's going to catch up with you. You can't keep it all hidden forever." Jada and Marcus exchanged another look. Then, without another word, Marcus stood up and walked toward the door. "This conversation is over," he said, his tone final. Lana didn't push back. She knew she was out of her depth now, but she couldn't help but feel that she was standing at the edge of something far darker than she could have ever imagined. Whatever secrets Jada and Marcus were hiding, it was clear they were more dangerous than she had thought. As she left the bridal suite, Lana glanced over her shoulder one last time, feeling like she had just stumbled into a web that was far more tangled than she had realized. But she wasn't done yet. Something was coming, something she could feel in her bones, and it wasn't going to be pretty. The day of the wedding arrived, and despite everything Lana had discovered, she had to push it all aside. There was no room for distractions now. The resort was buzzing with energy as the guests arrived, the soft hum of excitement filling the air. The ceremony was set to take place on the beach, the golden sand stretching out toward the horizon, where the waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. The setting was nothing short of breathtaking, a picture-perfect moment waiting to unfold. But even as Lana worked to ensure every detail was flawless, she couldn't shake the nagging sense of impending danger. It wasn't just the secrecy about Raven DeMarco that unsettled her. It was the couple's strange coldness. They were no longer the couple she had worked with all those months. There was an aloofness in their demeanor, a sense of urgency in their movements, as if they were preparing for something far more than a wedding. As Lana made her way through the crowd, checking on last-minute arrangements, she spotted Raven DeMarco standing alone near the edge of the venue. He looked calm, composed, and very much in control, the kind of man who didn't flinch under pressure. His piercing eyes seemed to be scanning the crowd, but when he noticed Lana, he gave her a small, polite nod. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over to him. "Mr. DeMarco," Lana said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've heard a lot about you. I just wanted to introduce myself." Raven's lips curled into a small smile, but there was no warmth in it. "It's a pleasure, Lana," he said coolly, his voice smooth as silk. "I hope everything is running smoothly for you today." Lana smiled back, but it felt strained. She wasn't sure what kind of game he was playing, but she knew it was a dangerous one. The more she was around him, the more she felt like he was hiding something dark, something far beyond the luxury of the wedding. "You've been involved with the family for a long time, I understand," Lana continued, her curiosity burning. "What's your connection with Jada and Marcus? You seem to know them quite well." Raven's eyes flickered for a moment, but he recovered quickly, his gaze cold and unreadable. "We've worked together in the past, but Jada and Marcus are family now. They've come a long way." His words didn't reassure Lana. In fact, they made her even more suspicious. The air between them seemed to tighten, and just as she was about to press him further, Marcus appeared at her side, a friendly but firm smile on his face. "Everything okay here, Lana?" Marcus asked, his voice smooth and unbothered. Lana quickly stepped back, not wanting to appear out of place. "Yes, everything is fine." Marcus nodded, his smile never wavering, but there was something about the way his eyes lingered on her that made her skin crawl. It was as if he was silently warning her to stay in her lane. "Good," he said. "Now, enjoy the celebration. It's going to be a day to remember." With that, Marcus walked off, leaving Lana standing beside Raven, the weight of the unspoken words between them hanging heavy in the air. Lana knew she was just a small part of this world, a world she didn't fully understand. But she couldn't ignore the sense that she was being drawn into something much darker. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, the sense that this wedding wasn't just about a couple making a statement, it was about something far more dangerous. The ceremony started soon after, and Lana found herself back at the front, trying to focus on her responsibilities. But as the vows were exchanged and the guests cheered, She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The reception was everything a wedding planner could hope for: extravagant, flawless, and filled with laughter. But behind the smiles and toasts, the tension only continued to grow. Lana watched as Marcus and Jada danced, the perfect picture of a happy couple, on the outside at least, but something in their eyes, something in the way they moved, told a different story. They were holding back. Lana's mind kept racing. She kept thinking back to everything she had learned: the secrets, the lies, the dangerous connections. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wedding was a cover for something far more sinister. Just as she was about to make her way toward the bar for a much-needed drink, a loud crash broke the air, followed by a scream that echoed through the venue. Lana froze, her heart pounding. The sound came from the far side of the reception, and in an instant, guests began to panic, rushing to the source of the noise. Lana followed the crowd, her legs heavy with dread. When she reached the scene, she was met with a sight that made her blood run cold. Marcus was standing over a man, an older gentleman who was crumpled on the floor, his face pale, eyes wide in terror. "What happened?" Lana asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jada stepped forward, her face a mask of calm, but there was a dark look in her eyes. "He was going to ruin everything," she said flatly, her voice almost emotionless. Lana blinked, not understanding. "What are you talking about?" Jada turned to her, her smile tight. "Don't worry about it, Lana. This isn't your problem." But it was her problem. Lana could feel it in her bones. The man on the floor wasn't just someone who had accidentally caused a scene. He was part of the puzzle. Lana could feel it, could feel his presence in the air, even though he was unconscious. Before she could say anything else, Marcus's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Get him out of here," he ordered. 2 security guards appeared, dragging the man away with alarming efficiency. No one seemed to notice or care that something had just happened. The reception continued as if nothing had changed, the guests oblivious to the danger lurking just beneath the surface. But Lana knew. This wasn't a random incident. This man had been part of the scheme, their scheme, and whatever it was, it had just begun to unravel. The night wore on, but Lana could barely concentrate. The elegant ballroom, now bathed in a soft glow from chandeliers above, felt suffocating. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the swirling of dancers, it all seemed to blur into a background noise. Lana couldn't shake the feeling that she was being swept into something much darker than a wedding. The incident with the man, and the way Jada and Marcus had so quickly shut it down, had left a mark on her. She knew she had to figure out what was going on, but each step she took seemed to only pull her deeper into a web of lies. She made her way to the back of the ballroom, where the staff were preparing drinks and snacks for the guests. She needed a moment to think, to clear her head. But as she rounded a corner, she was met by a figure standing in the shadows, Raven. He didn't look surprised to see her. His expression was calm, almost knowing. "I've been waiting for you," Raven said, his voice low, steady. Lana's heart skipped a beat. "Waiting for me? Why?" He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "You're getting too close, Lana. You've already seen too much tonight." Lana swallowed hard, her instincts telling her to back away. But she stood her ground. "I don't understand. What is this all about? What's happening here?" Raven's lips curved into a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's simple. This wedding was never just about a couple joining hands. It was about power, control." A message Lana's breath caught. A message? What kind of message? Raven didn't answer right away. Instead, he seemed to study her, like he was weighing her worth in his mind. Then, his voice dropped even lower. Do you really think Jada and Marcus would have come this far without some help? Without people backing them, guiding them? The weight of his words sank in, and Lana felt a chill run through her. She had always known there was something off about this couple, but now she was starting to understand. They weren't just playing a part, they were being played. Raven continued, his voice almost a whisper. They've been involved in things much bigger than you or I could ever imagine. You're just a pawn in a game far beyond your reach. Lana felt a tightness in her chest. What kind of game? Raven's smile twisted, a cruel edge to it. The kind that keeps people like you in the dark. The kind that destroys anyone who tries to pull back the curtain. He paused, his gaze never leaving hers. You're not the only one asking questions. But trust me, Lana, if you keep digging, you might not like what you find. Lana felt a sense of panic rising in her chest. She had been right all along. This wedding, these people, there was something monstrous lurking beneath the surface. Something dangerous. I'm not afraid of the truth, Lana said, her voice shaky but defiant. Raven chuckled darkly. You will be. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. His words echoed in her mind, twisting into a knot of fear. She wasn't sure how much more of this she could take, but she couldn't back down now. She had to know the truth, no matter the cost. With shaky legs, Lana turned back toward the ballroom, her mind racing. She needed to find out what Jada and Marcus were hiding, but the deeper she dug, the more she realized. She was getting dangerously close to something she might not survive. The rest of the night passed in a blur, but Lana couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. Every time she looked at Jada or Marcus, a new wave of suspicion hit her. Their perfect smiles, their flawless facade, it all felt so fake, so rehearsed, and Raven's warning echoed in her mind like a ticking clock, reminding her that she was getting too close to something she might not be able to handle. She had to act fast. She couldn't keep waiting for answers. It was time to dig deeper. Lana excused herself from the reception, her heart pounding in her ears. She needed to find something, anything, that could help her make sense of this twisted situation. She knew there were rooms in the back of the resort that were off limits to the guests, including the VIP suite where Jada and Marcus had been staying. Without thinking twice, she slipped away from the party and made her way down the dimly lit hallway. Her footsteps were quiet against the polished floors, but each step felt like it reverberated through her body. The tension in her body was almost unbearable as she approached the door to the VIP suite. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the handle, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one was following. The door creaked as it opened, and Lana stepped inside. The room was luxurious, decorated in golds and deep reds, but there was something unsettling about the stillness of it all. It felt too perfect, like a stage set for a play. She moved quickly, her eyes scanning every corner of the room, and then, in a drawer tucked away in the corner, she found it. A folder, a simple manila envelope, but the weight of it felt like the world had just dropped into her hands. She opened it, her breath catching in her throat as she flipped through the pages. There were contracts, legal documents, some with signatures that didn't match the names she recognized. But it wasn't just the contracts that made her freeze. It was the photographs. Lana's eyes widened as she flipped to the next page, a photo of Marcus standing with a man she didn't recognize, both men smiling like old friends. But there was something about the photo that felt wrong, something about the way they stood together, too close. And then it clicked. The man in the picture wasn't just a friend. He was someone powerful, someone with connections that could make or break people. And Marcus, it seemed, was far more than a wedding planner or businessman. Her heart raced as she turned the page again. More photos, more names, and then a headline she didn't expect to see. DeMarco International, Investment in Underground Networks. Lana's hands went cold. She had heard whispers about DeMarco International before, but she never thought it would be connected to something this dark, something criminal. As the pieces started to fall into place, Lana's mind began to race. She realized this wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was a cover-up. The real reason they were here, at this lavish resort, wasn't to celebrate love. It was to make a deal, to solidify their position in a dangerous underground network. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the last page, which was marked with a chilling note. Wedding is the cover. You know what happens next. It was clear now. Jada, Marcus, and Raven had all been playing her from the start. The wedding was a front for something far worse, and Lana had just stumbled into the middle of it. She felt the walls closing in. She was in too deep now. But before she could process everything, the door to the suite creaked open behind her. "Looking for something, Lana?" The voice sent a chill through her spine. She spun around, her heart in her throat. It was Marcus. His face was cold, but there was a glint in his eyes that made her blood run cold. He had been watching her, waiting for her to uncover the truth. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" Marcus said, stepping further into the room. Lana's mind raced. She had no way out. She had to think fast. She wasn't sure who she could trust anymore. The man who had appeared to be charming and charismatic was now the one person standing between her and the truth. "You can't just walk away from this, Lana," Marcus continued, his tone darkening. "You've seen too much, and you know what happens when people get too close." Lana's pulse quickened. She had to escape. But Marcus was blocking the door. She had no time to waste. In that moment, everything clicked. Raven's cryptic warning, the documents in her hand, the photos, all of it led back to one horrifying conclusion. Marcus wasn't just a businessman. He was part of something much bigger, a criminal network, and she was caught in the middle. Lana's breath hitched. She had to get out, and she had to do it now. Lana's mind raced as she tried to make sense of everything in those final moments. She was cornered, and Marcus was closing in, his eyes cold and calculating. He knew she had uncovered too much, and she could see the flicker of rage behind his composed exterior. But there was no way out unless she acted fast. Her heart pounded in her chest as she backed away from him, pretending to hold her ground, hoping he wouldn't notice her eyes flickering towards the window. The glass was locked, but it was her only chance. If she could break it, she could escape to the fire escape on the side of the building. But there was no room for hesitation. "I knew you'd figure it out," Marcus said, his voice dangerously calm. "But this is where it ends, Lana. You've crossed a line." Lana's mind was spinning. She had no idea what he would do next, but she could feel the tension in the air. She knew she couldn't trust him. Marcus was no longer the charming man she'd met at the wedding. He was a predator, and she was his prey. The thought made her blood run cold. She steadied herself and took a step back, her foot silently inching toward the windowsill. Her hands were shaking, but she knew she had to stay calm. If she gave him any indication that she was scared, he'd make his move. "You think I'm afraid of you?" Lana said, her voice a little unsteady but filled with defiance. "I'm not afraid of anything." Marcus smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I think you are. And that's exactly why you're not leaving this room alive." The words sent a chill through Lana, but they also sparked something inside her, a burning need to survive. She couldn't afford to freeze up. Not now. With a sudden movement, Lana lunged forward, knocking over a chair as she raced toward the window. Marcus was quick, faster than she expected, but she managed to throw her weight against the frame. The glass shattered with a sharp crack, and Lana didn't hesitate. She grabbed the edges of the broken window, her fingers digging into the sharp shards as she clambered out onto the fire escape. The cool night air hit her like a slap to the face, but it was a relief. She was free. For now. Her heart hammered in her chest as she climbed down the narrow metal steps, her legs trembling with adrenaline. She could hear Marcus's footsteps behind her, and the sound made her push harder, faster, as if the very breath in her lungs was on the line. Just as she reached the ground, she heard him shout from the top of the fire escape, "You won't get far, Lana. We're always watching you." But Lana didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. She knew she had to keep moving, had to disappear before Marcus and his men could catch up with her. She slipped into the shadows of the alleyway, her mind still reeling from the revelation that her entire world had just been turned upside down. The wedding, the business deals, the underground network. It was all a carefully orchestrated lie, and she had been sucked into it. But one thing was clear. She wasn't going to let them silence her. She wasn't going to let them get away with murder. Lana didn't stop running. She moved through the back streets of the resort, her breath ragged as she darted between buildings and alleys. She had no plan, no safe place to go, but her instinct for survival was all she had left. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, and every step felt like it could be her last. But there was something else burning in her chest now. Anger. A deep, raw anger that she couldn't ignore. She had uncovered the truth, the ugly, twisted truth about Marcus and Jada, and now she had to make sure everyone knew. There was no way she was walking away from this. The night was eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the distant hum of the ocean waves and the occasional rustle of leaves. But the silence didn't last long. Lana heard footsteps, faint but distinct, getting closer. She stopped in her tracks, her heart leaping into her throat. She knew who it was. Marcus. And this time, he wasn't alone. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to steady her breathing, her fingers instinctively clutching the papers she had taken from the VIP suite. The information in that folder was damning, and it was the only weapon she had left. Lana's mind raced. She needed a plan. She couldn't just run anymore. She had to face them head on. There was no going back. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, quickly texting the only person she knew she could trust, her old friend, Officer Daniels. "I know everything. Marcus is behind it all. Meet me at the marina. It's urgent." She hit send and slipped the phone back into her bag, just as Marcus's shadow loomed closer. He was almost here. She could hear his voice now, low and cold. "I know you're out there, Lana," he called into the darkness. "You can't run from this. No one escapes from me." Lana's breath caught in her throat. There was no more time for fear. It was time to face him. She stepped out of the shadows, her voice steady but loud enough for him to hear. "I'm not running anymore, Marcus. This ends tonight." Marcus stopped in his tracks, a flash of surprise crossing his face, quickly replaced by that same cold smile. You really think you can stop me? Lana's grip on the folder tightened. I know what you're doing, and I'm going to make sure everyone else does too. A dangerous glint appeared in Marcus's eyes. You really don't understand, do you? It's too late for you, Lana. It's always been too late. And with that, the final confrontation began. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Lana stood her ground, her hands gripping the folder tightly, as if it could somehow shield her from the storm that was about to hit. She could hear Marcus's slow, deliberate steps approaching, the sound sending shivers down her spine. His calm, cold demeanor was a stark contrast to the chaos raging inside her. She had no choice now. She had to confront him, even if it meant putting herself in even more danger. You think you can just walk away from this? Marcus said, his voice dripping with venom. You think you've won? Lana met his gaze, unflinching. I haven't won anything, Marcus, but I'm not going to let you get away with this. Not after everything I've seen. A cruel laugh escaped his lips, sending a chill down her spine. You think you understand what's going on? You're just a pawn in a game you'll never win. All you have is a folder full of worthless documents. It's not going to save you. Lana's mind raced. He was right about one thing. She was out of her depth. She didn't have the resources, the power, or the connections that Marcus had. But what she did have was the truth. And the truth was a weapon more dangerous than anything he could throw at her. Maybe, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. But I'm not the only one who's going to see it. Marcus's smile faded, his eyes narrowing. What do you mean by that? Before she could answer, the sound of tires screeching echoed down the alleyway. Lana's heart skipped a beat as a black SUV pulled into view, headlights cutting through the darkness. She knew who it was before the car even stopped. Officer Daniels had arrived. The doors of the SUV flung open, and two uniformed officers stepped out, guns drawn. Lana didn't have time to react, but she could see the surprise in Marcus's eyes as the officers moved in, blocking the exit from the alley. You're surrounded, Marcus, Officer Daniels called out, his voice cutting through the tense silence. Put your hands where we can see them. Marcus looked from the officers to Lana, his face twisted in disbelief. You think they're going to protect you? You think anyone can stop me? Lana's grip tightened around the folder, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a sense of power. The truth was out now, and there was no turning back. You're done, Marcus, she said, her voice unwavering. This game is over. For a moment, everything stood still. The alley was eerily silent except for the sound of the officers' radios crackling and the distant hum of the city. Then, with a swift movement, Marcus turned, lunging toward one of the officers with terrifying speed. But the officers were quicker. They reacted in unison, restraining him before he could make a move. In the chaos, Lana's heart was pounding in her chest, but a part of her felt relieved. Finally, Marcus was no longer in control. The truth had won. Officer Daniels walked toward her, his expression serious but not without a hint of relief. You did the right thing, Lana. You gave us the evidence we needed. We've been tracking Marcus for a while now. This ends tonight. Lana nodded, but the weight of everything that had happened still hung heavy on her shoulders. The lies, the deception, the twisted world of underground networks, it was all too much. But, at least now, she knew the truth, and that truth had brought Marcus down. As the officers took Marcus away in cuffs, Lana stood in the shadows watching the scene unfold. Her mind was racing, but she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of closure. This nightmare was over, for now. But she also knew something else. There was always another game, and no matter how many times she won, there would always be someone like Marcus, someone waiting to pull the strings from the shadows. The world was full of darkness, but Lana had learned that even in the deepest shadows, the truth would always find its way to the surface. And as long as she had the truth, she would never stop fighting. Just as the officers were about to drive Marcus away, Lana turned to walk away from the scene, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. She felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion, her body drained from the night's events. But just as she took a few steps, she heard a voice behind her, familiar yet unexpected. Lana. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She turned slowly, the chill of dread creeping down her spine. It was Raven. "I thought you'd be long gone by now," Lana said, her voice low and cautious. Raven smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I had a feeling you'd make it this far. You're stronger than I thought." Lana's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean by that?" Raven stepped closer, her gaze lingering on the officers as they led Marcus away. "I'm not here to congratulate you, Lana. I'm here to warn you." Lana's breath caught in her throat. "Warn me about what?" Raven's smile widened, but it was a dark, almost predatory smile. "Marcus was just a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. You've taken down one player, but the game isn't over. It's just beginning." Lana's pulse quickened as she realized the truth behind Raven's words. Marcus wasn't the mastermind. He was just a pawn, and there were far more dangerous people involved than she could have ever imagined. "You can't run from this," Raven said, her tone almost sympathetic now. "You've made enemies, Lana, and they won't forget what you've done. They'll be coming for you next." Lana's stomach dropped. She had thought it was over, but it seemed she had only scratched the surface. Raven's words echoed in her mind like a warning bell, but it was too late now. There was no turning back. Lana took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Let them come," she said quietly. "I'm ready." And as Raven disappeared into the night, Lana realized the fight wasn't over. It had just begun. Lana stood there for a moment, her mind racing as Raven's cryptic warning echoed in her thoughts. The weight of the night was heavy on her shoulders. Marcus in custody, the evidence secured, and yet the nagging feeling that this was far from over lingered like a shadow. She had thought the truth would bring closure, but in reality it had opened a new door to a world even darker than she had imagined. As the police car carrying Marcus drove away, Lana felt a sudden chill wash over her. It wasn't the night air. It was the realization that her life, as she knew it, would never be the same. No matter how many people she brought down, no matter how much truth she uncovered, there would always be more secrets, more lies, more dangerous people waiting in the wings. The game had just escalated, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. Officer Daniels, who had been watching the whole exchange between Lana and Raven from a distance, walked over to her, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. Lana turned to him, her lips pressed into a tight line. "I will be. I think it's just hitting me. Everything that happened tonight." Daniels nodded. "It's a lot, but you did good. You brought him down, Lana. That's what matters." Lana wanted to believe him, but the nagging doubt wouldn't go away. She had stopped Marcus, but at what cost? The secrets, the lies? Had she truly uncovered all of them, or had she just scratched the surface? Marcus was just the beginning. She muttered more to herself than to him. There's so much more beneath the surface. So many more people involved. Daniels raised an eyebrow, but his expression softened. I know it feels like that, but for now, you've done more than most could ever dream of. You've given us something real to work with. Lana didn't feel relieved, though. Not yet. Not when she still had so many questions. I'm not done yet, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniels gave her a long look, as if weighing her words. You've been through a lot tonight. Maybe it's time to take a step back. Let us handle the rest. Lana shook her head. I can't. There's something more here, and I need to know what it is. Daniels sighed but didn't argue. All right, but you need to be careful, Lana. You've made enemies tonight, big ones, and they won't forget what you did. Lana glanced back at the distant horizon, where the first light of dawn was beginning to break over the city. It was a new day, but for her, the fight had only just begun. The lies, the deception, they weren't over, and neither was her mission. She couldn't rest. Not yet. I've made my choice, Lana said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. I'm not backing down now. I'll finish this, no matter what. Daniels didn't respond immediately. He just gave her a nod, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and understanding. He knew how this worked. He knew that once someone stepped into this world, there was no easy way out. As the officers began to clear the scene, Lana turned and began to walk away, her footsteps slow but determined. The city was just waking up, oblivious to the storm that had passed through it the night before. But Lana wasn't going to forget. She couldn't. Not when there were still so many questions left unanswered. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She pulled it out, her eyes scanning the message that flashed across the screen. It's not over. We need to talk. Raven. Lana felt her heart skip a beat. She had known this was coming. Raven wasn't done with her, and as much as she hated to admit it, Lana knew that Raven was right. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something much bigger than she could have ever imagined. But Lana was ready. She had already come too far to turn back now. The truth was out there, and she wasn't going to stop until it was all exposed. She had a feeling that the real battle was about to begin. The truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deep the lies go, but uncovering it comes with a price. It takes courage, persistence, and the willingness to face uncomfortable realities. The journey for truth isn't always easy, and sometimes it means standing up to powerful forces that try to keep the truth hidden. But in the end, staying true to yourself and your beliefs is the only path that leads to real justice. Never back down from seeking the truth, because it's the one thing no one can take away from you. This story reminds us that while the truth can be messy and dangerous, it's the only thing that can truly set us free. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight to uncover what's been hidden, but those battles shape us and ultimately make us stronger.